pleasant good morning to you all our viewers. Thank you so much for tuning into Calmnet TV, not just another channel. This is the Friday edition of the Breakfast Show, and on Friday we discuss nothing but business. We bring you nothing but the best of what the business opportunities have to, or the business sector rather, have to offer out there. So I am your host for today, Prudence Chota, and of course I'm not alone. I have a special friend who I am joined with in studio, always joins me on this program on a Friday. I'm going to go throw it up to her to just say good morning to the viewer this Friday.
Good morning, first of all, Prudence, and good morning to our viewers. We thank you for once again joining us on this breakfast show. Every Fridays, as you get to know that we always look at the business sector, what is happening in the business sector. And we always encourage that you, our viewers who are listening to us, you get to send us your contribution, your comments regarding to some of the topics that we usually look at, and some of the topics that we will look at this morning. And before we go much into details, you know, Prudence, it's always important that we exercise, we keep fit, you know.
Yeah, so, it's ever important. In case you're wondering, who's this beautiful lady? She's forgotten to introduce herself. Her name is Miriam Kayemba.
Oh, really, Prudence? I was going to do that. I was going to do that after the morning boost, you know. It's good that you keep our viewers, you know, a bit of suspense. It's sometimes it's quite important.
No, yeah, there's nothing really wrong with that.
Like Prudence said, I'm a co-host here, Miriam Kayemba. So before we go much into details of what we have lined up for you this morning, we'll go into the morning boost. Catch us on the other side.
Good morning and welcome to our morning boost, and remember always to try do this at home early in the morning before you start your day. This is not the main workout, but this is just to help you get started your day and keep fit. So therefore, let's go. We're gonna keep it easy today. We'll make some aerobics movements. Aerobics is good for you, for blood circulation, to control your blood pressure, and also to make sure that you stay fit. So we're going to make some basic moves in aerobics. Let's go. Very easy. We start with marching. Go. Good morning, everybody. Good morning and welcome to our show. Let's go. Step touch. Last one. Hamstring. Last one. Knee high. Last one. Lateral legs. Last one. We're going to put now all the four together. That's what we're going to do. Okay, let's go. Last one. And knee high. Last one. Step touch. Last one. Step touch. Last one. Knee high. And marching. Keep marching, keep marching, keep marching. We're gonna change now. 2 knee each. Let's go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Let's keep pushing. I know you feel like giving up. Check with your neighbor how many minutes you've done. Let's go. Go. 2 each. Now let's do it faster. Change. 1, 2. Four. 4 each. Last 4. 2 each. 2. 2. 2, 3 each. Go. And marching. Go. How are you feeling on your legs? Let's go now. March, 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 march. Keep marching. We're almost there. Let's go. March, 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 march. My producer is dancing behind the camera. I wish I can show you. Let's march. Let's go. Bring in a B step now. It was a pleasure doing a workout with you this morning. I look forward to another workout with you. Make sure stay fit and enjoy the rest of your day. This is Isaac Matsa, and guess what? I'm signing out. Thank you.
Thank you so much for still staying tuned to Camnet TV, not just another channel. I hope you have exercised this morning. I hope you have kept yourselves fit. Remember, it is always important. I always emphasize when I come on this program on Friday to say it's very important for you to keep fit. It's very important for you to exercise. It's very important for you to stay fit. So ensure that you always exercise in the morning. Ensure you exercise. If you can't do it in the morning, you can do it in the evening before going to bed. But always ensure that you keep fit. Miriam.
Exactly. You know, most of the time we have this tendency of ignoring some of these simple things, like, you know, you need to wake up in the morning, do some yoga, exercise, you know, have a cup of coffee. These are they might seem very simple, but they're very important to your health. And always ensure that you actually follow some of those guidelines that even healthy personnel just get to give us advice on that. Yeah, so right about now we'll go into our sports segment, and we are joined in studio by our sports personnel, or rather sport reporter, Amos Lungu. Amos Lungu, but most of the time I know he prefers to be called Amore.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Amore, good morning.
Good morning, Miriam, and good morning, Prudence.
Thank you so much, Amos. So, of course, we're just from exercising, but we're now going to talk about the sports activities that we have for the day. So we all know that there is AFCON going on, the Africa Cup of Nations, and maybe Amos, just to get into talking, where are we as in the Africa Cup of Nations?
Okay, the knockout stages, I would say, were completed yesterday after the games. We saw Ivory Coast against Algeria and Gambia against Tunisia, Mali against Mauritania. But the biggest upset for me yesterday was the game between Ivory Coast and Algeria. which we saw Algeria, the defending champions, Prudence, being beaten.
Pushed.
And
3-2. I think I saw that one.
I would say this is the Africa Cup of Nations that is full of surprises, me, because we are seeing the big guns being putted out. We saw Ghana, and after Ghana was putted out, people on social media were all over saying next is Algeria, and it happened yesterday.
Wow.
So now we are in the knockout stages, and you know the way the groups are set. And I remember having a discussion with Bimak, and he was wondering and asking me to say Vachimwene going through, which is Malawi, because they are the ones remaining who I would say would support. But anyway, all in all, Miriam, we are in the round of 16 fixture now. These are the knockout stages, and from here, that's where we are going to the quarterfinals. And the teams that made it to the last 16, Burkina Faso, who are going to host, that's Gabon, that's on the 23rd. And we've got Nigeria, who've been placed against Tunisia. And we've got Guinea versus Gambia, Cameroon versus Comoros. And we've got Senegal versus Cape Verde. We've got Morocco hosting who play Malawi, and we've got Ivory Coast versus Egypt, and Mali versus Equatorial Guinea. But when you look at all these fixtures from the last 16 that we have, for me, the most tight encounter is going to be Ivory Coast versus Egypt, because when you look at it, for me so far, the play style that Ivory Coast is portraying at the tournament, Prudence, I would say for me they are the ones who I feel might carry the day.
Okay. That's interesting. There's a team, Comoros. Is that what you call it?
Comoros.
They equally put up a good fight. I'll go with them anyway. Let's see how it unfolds. But they put up a good fight against a team that they played with. Looking at the caliber of the team.
Okay. You know, looking at these are teams where you would even sit down and ask yourself to say, where are they getting the whole morale? Where are they getting the fight that they are doing? Because when you talk of Comoros, it's a team that you were not expecting to reach this far.
Yeah.
And talk of Malawi. Malawi is also a team that we never expected would reach this far.
Exactly.
And with the rumors that were going around to say, no, Zambia is taking over Malawi because of one or two things. So I'm sure when they went there, they went with a purpose to say, you know, we've had all this backlash that has been going on, so we need to fight and show up. But it's a good thing. Malawi, Zimbabwe.
Because when you look at the teams that have made it here, you discover that, okay, there is Nigeria versus Tunisia, which is another interesting game as well. But let's look at the likes of Malawi, like you've said, and there's the likes of Equatorial Guinea. You know, these are all teams, the likes of Comoros. These are teams that would say, okay, pair them with Zambia, maybe we might say a different game, but they've made us proud. So for me, this is a lesson to say the game of football is evolving.
Exactly.
If Comoros Mimi can reach the extent of reaching the round of 16, even them, they've got a boost. Maybe us go in their camp, you will hear that we are playing to win it as well. So for me, even if I'm saying I would rather, or I'm preferring mostly, I would put my money on Ivory Coast. But though again, they are slim chances.
Are you betting?
That's what I would put. But looking at away from that, we had other games that were being played. That's we had the La Liga game where we saw Getafe beating Granada. That's by 4-2, and we also saw there was a postponement of one game. And in the Copa del Rey, drama as always, because we saw Elche FC being beaten by Real Madrid, and we saw both games. We saw both teams having red cards, and the disappointing of the night, Chota, was Barcelona being beaten by Athletic Club. A Barcelona that you would sit down back then and argue with me to say they are the best. Is it because of Messi?
We don't know. We'll leave it up to that anyway, but for now, the sporting industry, or rather the sporting sector, is getting very interesting. And we're going to be giving you nothing but the best highlights in terms of the Africa Cup of Nations and what is happening around. So that was Amos Lungu, of course. is specialized in sporting activities, and he was giving us an update of what is happening. So we've seen the games that are proceeding to compete. The group stages for AFCON are done. Amos has already indicated. Anyway, we look forward to supporting the African Cup of Nations. We need to support them, Amos, just like the way the European countries support their own. We equally need to support our African countries.
But you know, I am really looking forward that next time we have such games, we'll be able to see our own boys play. You know, it's sometimes
that's the target of the coach, Miriam, because after he was just appointed, I think he had a presser the day after, and then he said the target is to compete in the next Africa Cup of Nations. Because for him, it's not all about, he has everything at his disposal. He has all the players that he would select from. So we don't expect him to disappoint us in the next 4 years that's coming, because we are looking at qualifying for the next AFCON, and then we are looking at qualifying for the next World Cup. So within the range of his contract, which is a 4-year contract, but it's on a performance basis as well. So we are hoping to see our lads, Miriam, because I was even joking around to say, if Zambia was at this AFCON, maybe they would have performed a lot of wonders.
Exactly.
Looking at the teams that have performed as at now, meaning we would have done like a 2012.
Okay, so that was Amos Lungu giving us an update on the sporting activity. So stay tuned to Camnet TV, and we will be back shortly after this short break.
To all parents and guardians of the Camnet Stars, be informed that there will be a meeting at the Healing Word Ministries International Church in Ibex Hill on 22nd January 2022. Time, 10 hours to 11:30 hours. The future of this nation is in the hands of your children.
And we are just preparing for the game next week, the friendly match. We are working really hard and preparing for our first match.
Camnet Stars, the upcoming soccer giants in Zambia. Camnet TV is becoming big and better. You can now watch Camnet TV wherever you are around the world, simply by downloading the Camnet TV app. With Camnet TV app, you only use less bundles. Camnet TV, not just another channel.
Thank you so much for still staying tuned to Camnet TV, not just another channel. This is a breakfast show that comes to your screen every morning from 07 hours to 09 hours. And on Friday, we bring you nothing but the best of what the business sector has to offer. And of course, I think you have seen the topic of discussion that is on our screen right now. And that is what we are getting to discuss. But even before we get to dig into that, we are going to look at the money market as about yesterday, the close of business. How was the kwacha performing against other major convertibles? So the kwacha against the United States dollars was buying at 17 kwacha 25 ingwe and selling at 17 kwacha 59 ingwe. The euro bond was buying at 18 kwacha 89 ingwe and selling at 19 kwacha 26 ingwe. The British pound was buying at 23 kwacha 15 ingwe and selling at 23 kwacha 96 ingwe. The rand was buying at 1 kwacha 14 ingwe and selling at 1 kwacha 16 ingwe. So just in case you're planning of doing business, you're planning of converting those dollars that you have into kwacha, those that British pound, that if you are planning on going to South Africa to do business, you are supposed to know where your kwacha is against other major convertibles. So that was the money market for today, the update, and that was the figures that we had by yesterday. And just maybe to talk a little bit about this, Miriam, our kwacha, we saw kwacha appreciate over time, but now it has begun to depreciate. And we are really wondering what can be the contributing to this, Miriam. I do remember that Minister of Finance, Dr. Msokotwane, pardon me, at one point did indicate that the reason why we are seeing the kwacha appreciate is the fact that we are not paying our debt. So the very moment we begin to service our debt, expect the kwacha to depreciate. But that was, it gave a period to say that was between January. They are holding a meeting with the lenders between January and somewhere March, April. So that's when the conclusions are supposed to be done. So basically, for me, Miriam, I expected maybe after April, that's when we're supposed to see our kwacha begin to depreciate, according to what the Minister of Finance said. Yeah, but we have not even started reservicing our debt. And of course, our currency against other major convertibles is not performing quite well. But we are hopeful to see what the new Dawn government...
Very hopeful. Yes. A lot of people, especially those in the business sector, very hopeful.
Of course, we are hopeful to see what the new Dawn government has in stock for us with regards to our currency's performance against other major convertibles. So right about now, we are going to be zooming into some of the stories that made headlines this week. And Miriam, we did see a story from the Poultry Association of Zambia where they've indicated that they are drowning about 1.1 million day-old chicks. What that means when they say drowning is killing them. By drowning them, you drown the birds and they die. And if you look at the price of the chick right now, it's about 13 kwacha, 15 gwe. It's 16 kwacha, but this time they are running promotions. So it's about 13 kwacha, 15 gwe. So if you multiply that 1.1 million against 13 kwacha, 15 gwe, it's giving us something like 14 million and above.
That's a lot
so we are
money.
losing, we've lost revenue in amount of about 14 million kwacha. That's a lot of money. So we are going to zoom into that story, even as we get to discuss a little bit about it. According to the Poultry Association of Zambia, the country produces about 2.1 million day-old chicks weekly against a consumption of about 1.6 million per week. Poultry Association of Zambia Executive Director Dominic Chanda, however, says the low demand of day-old chicks on the Zambian market during this period has been prompting hatchery companies to kill the surplus day-old chicks by drowning them. Mr. Chanda says the country has since December of 2021 drowned about 1.1 million birds, which amounts to over 14 million kwacha, excluding the expenses in feeding the mothers to the chicks.
That we have is that in the last 1 month, this country has drowned close to about almost 1.1. We don't know if we add what has been drowned this particular week. As I indicated, it's normal. In a normal year, this is normal, but the numbers is huge. This is the technical term used in the industry where you kill the chicks that do not have the owners. Sometimes other companies use what is called gassing. You kill them because you can't take them anywhere. There's no customer for them. Because when you talk about 1.1 million, a chick is about 16 kwacha, 15 gwe, although right now a lot of hatcheries are actually doing promotions. The average is about 13 kwacha, 15 gwe.
The country had in June of 2021 experienced a shortage of day-old chicks on the Zambian market, which prompted the then government to suspend the export of day-old chicks and stock feed. Mr. Chanda says the prolonged ban on the export is also a contributing factor to drowning the birds and have called on the government to look into the matter.
We also have to understand that 6 months ago the government issued an export ban of day-old chicks. What usually happens during this period is that when you have excess, the export market becomes the vent through which these day-old chicks can actually be sold, so that you avoid hemorrhaging, financial hemorrhages for all the players along the value chain. We met the ministry last week.
Communicating. Good morning.
Specifically just to discuss this issue so that export can be allowed, and the ministry assured us to say they are looking at alternatives of actually opening up.
And while the Lusaka City Council, through the town clerk Alex Mwansa, has issued a notice advising the general public to relocate their animals and birds away from residential areas, and that failure to comply will force the authority to enforce the Public Health Act Cap 295, Section 68 and 69, Mr. Chanda says such is not possible, adding that the city has not enough space and farmland for people to move their animals.
When you have 80% of the people that are growing chickens are doing it at the backyard and be able to provide cheap source of proteins for the majority of Zambians, not only in Lusaka, and then you tell them to stop doing what they are doing at their backyard, it becomes a problem. Why? Because you can just assume removing that 80% of chickens out of the market. What are you promoting?
Prudence Chota, reporting for Kamne TV News. There you have it. Poultry Association of Zambia Executive Director Dominic Chanda was just explaining what is currently happening with regards to day-old chicks.
Yeah, just to help us understand, from the clip played, you did the story. You said in June 2021, government imposed a ban,
Yes.
you know, on the export of
their old
chicks.
chicks. Yes. So what was happening last year in June? Okay, according to what Mr. Chanda explained, we were expecting Mr. Chanda in studio today to just explain this, but hopefully we are having him next week where he's going to explain in detail. But Miriam, from the interaction that I had with him, Mr. Chanda did indicate to say the demand for their old chicks is in phases. So between the period of November, December, and this one, January, February, the demand is quite low. But what happens is when the demand is low, production does not stop. So in Zambia, we produce about 2 million chicks, day-old chicks, every week. So the demand at its highest peak is about 2,100,000. That's what he said. So that's the target, because when it's at its highest peak, when people are buying chicks, like for example for the festive season, that's the peak time, and that time begins somewhere, he said, around July, July going this side. There is that peak period. So because there is this very high demand of birds, the production goes up. So for archery companies, they maintain the production up to 2 million. But what happens is during this period, the demand for their old chicks reduces. You know, people have already sold during Christmas when they buy, and others will find that this is a farming period, so they go into farming and not poultry. So the demand is low. But production does not change. It remains constant. So they keep producing those 2 million birds, and then the demand is about 1.6 million. So there is a surplus. So what are you going to do with that surplus? You don't have where to take them. They have no customers. So you drown them by killing them. So what happens is, if the import ban is if you are allowed, permit is there for them to import those chicks, instead of killing them or drowning them, they export them. I mean, yes. But what has been happening is, since June, there was that time when we really had a demand for chicks in the country. That was last year, around June. There was a spike in the demand because the people are hatching were exporting. So because of that high demand of these day-old chicks, government imposed a ban.
Because of the shortage? Because
of the shortage that we had on the market. Because the hatcheries were exporting a lot, even the chicks were on demand outside the country, so they preferred to export. So that caused a shortage on the Zambian market. So in order to cushion the shortage, the government decided to introduce a ban of exporting their old chicks. And now, of course, now this has happened. So that ban, and we saw chicks on the market and stuff like that. But during this period, they are producing more than we are consuming. So what are you going to do with the old chicks? They are drowning them, killing them. Yes.
Anyway, we hope that we can host Mr. Chanda next week so that he can just explain more into details with regard to this issue. But right about now, we are going to zoom in another headline that of a clip that was played yesterday of the Inspector General of Police who toured the different markets in Lusaka.
It was a heightened operation Thursday morning as Zambia Police Inspector General Lemi Kajoba went on a fact-finding mission around markets and bus stations in Lusaka Central Business District to ascertain the situation of political party cadres in these facilities. Political party cadres alleged to be from the Patriotic Front have allegedly been harassing citizens in these facilities, a situation which some say was inherited by cadres from the United Party for National Development UPND. The new administration, however, has come strong against this vice, promising the full wrath of the law to perpetrators. Police Inspector General Lemi Kajoba, in the company of Deputy Police Inspector General in charge of administration Doris Nayame, and Deputy Police Inspector General in charge of operations Muna Muyambango, toured these facilities. The police in Tuareg assessed major public facilities, namely Intercity Bus Terminus, Kulima Tower Bus Station, Wuseko Market, and City Market. The general response from council officials, traders, and drivers is that there is a general improvement in these facilities.
One for the freedom. Kulibati Vuta. So I'm going to have a booking a bus or UPND, what passangram, fatty PF. There's a thing a mahala, airport, mahala, not the but the government here will appoint. Stars bomb HS and
Kuzan Bazona Pan. kuli banga nso ntereko kwe bati paliko kada muno kuli be makada banasira tina mtendere mshemushi tizisebenzera mwetufuni akada kuli be banaye banafuna vote first 2 weeks after close PF benzo bwera but after wabili bachoka bati palibe chat ambira na statement ya president ya no kadarism kuli be mwantu wa mulungu ngaba makada zikulibe mwana bozani kuchamo tezo ngani ya kutala mulapa kulibe tika chini tenda be kulibe bewa mama
Some bus drivers spoken to by Camnet News at City Market, however, alleged that this vice has not completely phased out.
Each station my buses 300 kwacha every day. Drama za chilimba za bus drivers. Au makadaza wanapanga yozi ati many committee ati wanaichitira form ku secretariat ya UPND. So amabotenga ndalama kutazama drivers 300 each station every day ngatsufu na babo kupisha babo kunyamula bamandotenga magari bachokati kwakanyama kwati kuwadwani uko ndiko mabwera tuchinika wadwani babo kunyamula babo kutenga kupereka kuja kwenda kuchaya ufosi ngati paka wafiwa mapasa hizo ndalama.
Speaking at the Zambia Police Force headquarters, the police IG has warned of stern action against cadres who may want to harass citizens in the new administration.
However, I'm also aware, or equally aware, that there are a few criminal-minded individuals masquerading as UPND cadres who are going against those directives by soliciting for money from businessmen and women who are trading in these areas. As police, we will ensure that the new order of doing things in all the trading places across the country is in tandem with the policies of the new Dawn government of respecting the rule of law and human rights. Therefore, for those who choose to defy these directives, we will ensure that they are held accountable for their wrongdoings as individuals by bringing them to book.
The police IG has also directed that security should be enhanced at public facilities to prevent theft of property. Zipora Mchala, Camnet News, Lusaka.
There you have it. That was a clip that of what transpired yesterday at some of the trading places in Lusaka, namely Buseko Market, Intercity Bus Terminus and Kulimata Bus Station, where the police were just trying to inspect and make sure that we don't have the alleged cadres in the system, because a lot of people have continued to allege that these cadres have continued to harass them in the station, to demand for money in the station, and this is a vice that many people are still calling that it should come to an end. I do recall, Prudence, when the president was just sworn in during his inauguration in August, he did mention that he will make sure he puts an end to the lawlessness and ensure that there's no cadreism in all these marketplaces. Yeah, maybe your thoughts with regards to what transpired yesterday.
Okay, maybe my thought, Miriam, is just in ending cadreism, if you want to really see if cadres are on the market, maybe the way it was done, do you think it is the right thing that the Inspector General of Police did by alerting the cadres to say, we are coming to inspect how you are doing it in the market? If you really want to find out what's going, don't you think it was supposed to be the IG puts a team on standby and then they go undercover to see what is happening, so that, because honestly speaking, if I'm a cadre and I see a group of police officers walking to I would leave. And how do we even know that everyone who was interviewed in that clip, those at first are not cadres themselves collecting money? So I think maybe the best way to go about, if you're doing something that is of an investigative nature, is go undercover. I think
and you would agree with me. In the same clip, there was a man who said, no, they're still there. Other sources said, no, there's no cadreism, we are free, they're not collecting money anymore, they're not harassing us. But then we saw a clip of another source saying, no, They're actually still there. They're collecting money from us.
So 300 kwacha, that's a lot of money. Because some of these small buses, the 300 kwacha is what they cash in on a daily basis. But imagine that 300 kwacha has to go to cadre. So I think we do have a long way, Miriam, to go to end cadreism, and we need our men and women in uniform to pull up their socks in handling this matter. Otherwise, it's great. We are so grateful that President Hakainde Hichilema has always emphasized that lawlessness in his government is not going to be allowed. And cadreism is one of those issues that cost the Patriotic Front government to lose in the 12th August 2021 general election. So I think going forward, Miriam, we really need to put an end to this vice. Yeah, and you know, at some point, you know, this is somehow it falls under our topic of discussion this morning, or I would say rather our area of concern that we always look at, which is business. Imagine if cadres keep on collecting 300 from bus drivers every single day. That's a lot of money. And you know, this is again a loss to the drivers, because they're into business themselves. So, you know, you're trying to raise capital, and then you have someone demanding a 300 from you. You have council again demanding money from you that you need to pay your levies. This is something that we shouldn't see. Yeah, that brings us to the topic of discussion today, which is access to financing for SMEs. Perhaps the cadres that we have in these bus stops, Miriam, need to be empowered so that they can become SMEs. So how do we enhance our access to financing for SMEs, and how do they contribute to the development of the country? So just to discuss that topic, we have an important guest in studio. But before we introduce him, we are going to take a short breather. Join us even as we get to discuss this topic.
To all parents and guardians of the Camnet Stars, be informed that there will be a meeting at the Healing Word Ministries International Church in Ibex Hill on 22nd January 2022. Time, 10 hours to 11:30 hours. The future of this nation is in the hands of your children.
And we are just preparing for the game next week, the friendly match. We are working really hard and preparing for our first match.
Camnet Stars, the upcoming soccer giants in Zambia. Camnet TV is becoming big and better. You can now watch Camnet TV wherever you are around the world, simply by downloading the Camnet TV app. With Camnet TV app, you only use less bundles. Camnet TV, not just another channel.
There you have it. So we were, before we went for that break, we saw a clip where Inspector General of Police Lemi Kajoba yesterday was inspecting the bus stops just to ensure that cadreism comes to an end. And then before we went for a break, we did mention to say, you see, I think these cadres, they need to be empowered so that they can become SMEs and contribute to the development of the sector. So that takes us to the topic of discussion today, which is access to financing for SMEs. And to just help us pardon me, dig deeper into that topic, we have been joined by someone who's not new to the screens. Is that the words that I can use? Yes. Yes, we have been joined by someone who's not really new to the screens, who's going to, of course,
just help us discuss more about this, you know, highlight some of the challenges that SMEs face in Zambia, and what are some of the things that they can help them, you know, just develop their sector.
Yes, so we have been joined, of course, by Mr. Trevor Hambai. Have I pronounced your name correctly?
Yes, you've got the name right.
Yes, please. We have been joined by Mr. Trevor Hambai, who's our guest for today, who's going to be helping us discuss the topic that relates to financing for SMEs. So, Mr. Hambai, thank you so much for joining us on the program today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much. So, just to begin with the discussion, what role do SMEs play in the development of any country? Let's pick it up from there.
You'll appreciate, so if you're looking at the Zambian economy, is that 96% of the private sector, which is the businesses that are registered, are actually SMEs. So in essence, it's the biggest component of the private sector that is meant to contribute to the country's GDP. And the empirical evidence really is that 4 out of every 5 jobs that are created by SMEs. And that is why it is very important, because that we are able to support this SME sector. It is the one that is going to determine how much employment we can create for our country and their contribution towards the country's GDP. But lastly is that the SMEs are the ones that are also in touch with the grassroots, and they will be the ones making the contribution in terms of poverty reduction, because that is where the greatest poverty is within our country. And that is why it is so important that we are actually supporting SMEs.
Okay. That is interesting. So when we talk about SMEs in Zambia, do we really have the policies that support the growth and development of SMEs?
So positively, yes, there are policies that are actually speaking to wanting to support SMEs. What you do here is every time a government official comes on the platform, they'll tell you, they'll make the pronouncements that are speaking to supporting SMEs. The problem that we do have is obviously implementation, is that we have got a very poor implementation strategy, and the pronouncements do not actually translate into an implementation policy. So as a country, the policy that supports SMEs in this country is the same one that supports foreign direct investors, which is the Investment Act. And the Investment Act basically gives incentives to an entity that invests a certain amount of money, except that threshold that we do have is beyond the Zambian SMEs capacity. So they're not able to obviously take advantage of this because the threshold is too high. You have to invest a minimum of $250,000 for you to get fiscal incentives, which is what you hear around the tax holidays. Whereas an SME who starts having to do business today will have to pay tax immediately because they do not have a tax holiday. And this is taking away the little money that they have to be able to invest back into the business because they have to pay tax. This benefit is not the same with the FDI. The FDI can reinvest back their money that they're generating because they don't have to pay tax. And at the end of the year, they've also got an income tax holiday. So their profits are generally higher because of these incentives that we're giving them. So in essence, we really need to be able to change the policies to actually speak to supporting the domestic investment. You must appreciate that there are 2 different entities here. That our local domestic investors, this is like trying to grow a baby to a certain point until they are competitive. And that is the aspect that we totally need to change.
Okay. We have seen a lot of SMEs that have continued to face different challenges in their sectors, but we have the new ministry which is in place, dedicated to help them. Do you think it's doing its mandate, it's fulfilling?
The general idea is that we hope that it would actually do its mandate. The reason that it was established is that the interest of the SMEs was not being addressed fully. And you're hoping that by establishing this ministry, all those challenges that we're looking at will be addressed with a greater degree of focus. But you must appreciate is that we shouldn't be too hopeful. The SME ministry, in essence, is that the role that they have had been carried on previously by other line ministries, the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, the Ministry of Youth, or we're having to work towards having to support the SMEs with the same role that they want to give the Ministry of SMEs. So the essence was not really the issue around the ministry. The issue was around the implementation. So it's very possible that the Ministry of SMEs can come on board, but if they fall into the same trap that we had previously, is that they would not have implemented the policies, because these policies are still were still there with the previous government, and they were being run by different ministries. It's just that obviously now we need to be able to consolidate this. Remember again, in terms of the ministry having to implement any policies that are speaking to SMEs, is that they need to be able to have input and collaboration from other line ministries, which is the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Commerce, the Ministry of Tourism, the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Mines. all those ones have got specific SMEs that should be supported through the Ministry of SME, and they need to be able to find a balance as to how they're going to collaborate this. Otherwise, we'll have the same problem where the ministries themselves are really fighting about whose territory this is, because these are my SMEs.
That's where I was even coming to Mr. Ambai. I wanted to ask, you know, we still have the Ministry of Youth, Sports, and of course, I don't know if it's called Child Development now. Yeah, but we do have that ministry. We do have now the Ministry of SMEs, which they've introduced as a government, but we still have the Ministry of Commerce, Trade and Industry that is almost performing the same functions. So in order to ensure that this ministry fulfills its mandate or remains relevant to the Zambian sector, it shouldn't just be any ministry as usual. What is it that the ministry really needs to do in order for it to remain relevant and in order for it not to conflict with other ministries?
So that is a very difficult one in terms of how the different line ministries are going to be able to approach this. Is that each one has got a mandate, and as we are where we are right now is that they have not given out clear guidelines as who is responsible for what specific areas. Because yes, the Ministry of Youth says we have got everybody, you and everybody else under 35 is then a youth, and they want to be able to deal with them. But that same youth could also be an SME who's doing a specific business, and then the Ministry of SME says they need to be in their ministry. That SME who's doing business could also be doing small-scale mining, which is their business. Then the Ministry of Mines was saying these ones will fall under us. It will be an issue where they need to be able to put very clear guidelines. But the more pragmatic approach that I would think is that all these ministries need to have one working group that is going to support the SMEs, that they are all contributing towards the support of the SMEs, irrespective of which ministry they come from. And I think that is what is going to make the difference.
Pardon me, excuse me. That is important. In case you're just tuning into Camnet TV, this is a breakfast show where we discuss business on a Friday, like today, business for breakfast. And of course, our phone lines are open. In case you've got a question or you want to make a contribution, you can call with regards to some of the topics that we've been discussing from the time the program started, and of course right about now, where we have Mr. Trevor Ambai, who's an economist and also a financial advisor, and we are discussing SME financing. How can we ensure that our SMEs in the country are financed in order for their business to contribute to the development of the country? So, Mr. Ambai, when we just started, of course, you've mentioned some of the roles that the SMEs play in the development of the country. Let's talk about some of the financing for SMEs that we currently have as a country.
So access to finance is one of the biggest challenges that SMEs in this country have. The first one that you do find is that as an SME, if you're a startup up to 3 years, there is no financial institution that is going to finance you. And this constitutes the biggest portion of our SMEs, because these are youth who have come out of universities, they want to go into entrepreneurship, and they are starting a business. Or alternatively, you were working and you have lost your job and then you want to go into entrepreneurship. Is that, technically speaking, there is no financial institution in this country that is going to finance you. And that is the biggest problem. And then the second aspect comes from the fact that if, generally speaking, if you've been running your business for 3 years, and after 3 years that you qualify to be financed by a financial institution, is that there are still certain conditions that the financial institutions will be asking you, which are unlikely that you meet. And one of them is that you must have audited financial statements for 3 years. They know that you do not have audited financial statements.
But don't you think this is something that should be... Exactly. I think this is something that should change. We look...
Yes, it's not as simple as yes, it's something that should change. Remember, the financial institutions are private entities that are here to make a profit, just like you if you started a business. And they do not want to finance an SMEs who they think is likely to fail into having to repay them. And this is why it's become so difficult, but also because they've got options in terms of where they can take their money because of government treasury bills. That they would rather just invest their money in treasury bills and worry not that there's going to be a default. which is a key aspect. There are some institutions, obviously, that are public entities that have been set up to specifically support SMEs, like CEC and DBZ, Development Bank of Zambia. The challenge that we do have around those entities, it has obviously been political mileage, that they are being used by politicians for purposes of taking money out of the treasury. This is one of the facts that needs to change, that they need to run as independent professional bodies that are outside to be able to support the growth of the SME sector, which is the thing. And then you obviously hear about the empowerment funds. The empowerment funds is that you heard this especially towards the election period last year, that there were these empowerment funds. Between January and June of last year, government spent $14.1 million having to do empowerment funds. We don't know where those funds have gone. It was funds that were used for political mileage. But we also need to be able to use these funds to create sustainable economic support to SMEs. The 2022 budget, they have made a provision that there is 350 million kwacha, which is meant to support SMEs. But also, there is also funds that are in the CDF, the Constituency Development Funds. There is 884 million kwacha there that is also meant to support youth empowerment. This allows each constituency to have around 6 million kwacha to support SMEs. The key aspect there is what criteria they're going to use and how these funds are going to be utilized to ensure that they are actually sustainable, and this is not used for political mileage, that they're actually giving it out because they want favors from the electorate. So there are specific areas, and there are a number of areas where the SMEs should have been getting financing, but the programs are also not very clear. Is that it is very difficult to find out where that money is and how to access it. There is money with the Ministry of there's money with the Ministry of Youth and Sport that is given out to entrepreneurs. There are programs within the Ministry of Commerce. The Zambia Agriculture Trade Policy Program is under the Ministry of Commerce. Ministry of Finance has got another one, which is the NOA program. There are also donor agencies that are probably putting money together to support SMEs. The EU has got the Zambia Challenge. UK Aid has got Prospero funding. And then there's USAID has got different programs. One is called EDGE. The Finnish embassy has got another one called AGS. So there are programs in the country that are specifically meant to support SMEs. The issue is that we need to have a holistic approach as to what we want to do in the country as to support SMEs. That everybody is doing this as on different silos. We need to be able to, all of them, to come together, put their funding together, and we have a direction as to what we are doing in supporting these SMEs.
Mr. Mba, you've mentioned something that is very interesting right now that I didn't even really get to know about. And I'm sure even for the viewer out there, they have really a lot of questions. You've mentioned a lot of institutions that fund SMEs, but some of the institutions, we don't even hear about them. I did hear when you mentioned at first, you did mention the Development Bank of Zambia, which was established to support SMEs. We have also mentioned in the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Commerce, a Ministry of Youth. All these ministries have a specific sector that has allocated resources for the funding of SMEs. Then you've also mentioned these other countries that are contributing to improving the SMEs development in Zambia, but we rarely hear about these financing opportunities. Where are we missing it? Is it that we don't have a better way of communicating these informations?
So this is the reason that I have mentioned that we need to have a holistic approach towards this, is that one of the things that you have seen prior to this is that government ministries do not want to advertise this because they want to use them for political mileage, which is also the issue, is that if you actually did go to try and get funding for these programs, it will be very, very difficult. Firstly, you'll be running circles before you find out where the application is supposed to go. And even after the application has been done, you find that it will be you will not be able to get feedback in terms of who gets this funding. Very recently, just 2 weeks ago, the Ministry of IT Information Technology issued out quite a large amount of money to entrepreneurs. There were 40 entrepreneurs that had come through a program, and 20 of them got funding. And I think they were getting something like 300,000 kwacha each. And what you do find is that the first complaint that you see from there is that everybody is saying, but when did they start this process?
Application. When
Where
did the
was
process
the
start?
application done? And how did they select these people? Which is very unfortunate. We need to get to a point where there is a centralized documentation in terms of the data that is available, that if I'm an SME, I can go somewhere and it will tell me all the programs that are available in the country for me to be able to apply, and what is the criteria to be able to do this, so that it's making it easier for the entrepreneurs to actually look for the funding, which will then also include the financial institutions and whatever products they have that is meant to support SMEs.
Anyway, there we have it. It has been exhausted. I don't know, but most of the time we would see a lot of, SMEs facing these challenges. It's sad that a lot of people would do it for political mileage. But do you think we're able to see a change in this with the new government in place?
We are hoping that the change will come. You must remember that this change must come for the purposes of actually having to drive economic recovery. We always say that the economic recovery in this country must be driven by SMEs if we want to ensure that the resources remain in the country. What we had previously, remember that we had a GDP growth, which is our gross domestic product growth, that reached 9% previous to this, between 2004 and 2014. But this benefit did not trickle down to the Zambian people, because those resources were generated by multinationals who are foreign investors, and they took the resources out of the country. This is why you find that we didn't create enough employment, and that our poverty levels did not reduce during the period. So for this to happen is that the resources that we generate must remain within the country, and for the resources to remain within the country is that they must be generated by local SMEs, which is very, very important that we work towards having to ensure that this is going to change. It will require a lot of political will, but also it will require us having to change the systems that we're working with. Is that we have been running on these systems. I mean, this is, if you looked at a document which was 40 years ago, it still says the same things that we're talking about now in terms of economic growth, that we need to diversify away from copper, we need to develop our agriculture sector, we need to develop our tourism sector. This is the same thing that we have been saying 40 years ago. We're still saying it now. So we're doing the same things and hoping for a different result. We need to change how we approach this if we expect us to benefit the country. Okay, so
in 2019, if I get the statistics correctly, the Patent and Company Registration Agency, that is PACRA, did deregister about 24,000 businesses. These are small and medium enterprise. And when I sit and think about that, Mr. Amvai, this is really sad. And the question that I ask myself, even up to now, is why do SMEs in Zambia fail?
There are a number of reasons. So there are inherent challenges that SMEs have in this country. But one of the biggest one is also around debt financing. Is that 90% of all the Zambian small businesses will fail because they have supplied goods and services to a large organization and they have not been paid on time. Which is the trend that you see. We have got a country that runs on debt, that the SMEs themselves are actually now providing working capital for large organizations, which is a very big challenge. So first it starts from government. At the moment, government owes 47 billion kwacha, which is $2.5 billion to the private sector.
The private sector.
Which is in arrears that government has taken. And this trend continues. So you hear everybody saying that when you are an entrepreneur, can you take your goods, go and supply them to a chain store? The chain store will give you a 60-day credit. So what is really happening is that this SME is going to subsidize the cost of the chain store in terms of having to produce the goods. He's also going to have to transport the goods, subsidizing the transportation to go and deliver to this chain store. And then they also have to provide a merchandiser. This is a person who works for the company to look after your product in the chain store. So in essence, you are subsidizing that cost. And the chain store will basically sell the product, and the next day they externalize the resources out of the country. For you to be paid in 60 days, they have to bring back the money from wherever they have externalized it. So in essence, this is one of the biggest challenges in terms of debt financing, that the SMEs are subsidizing this operation. The second one is access to market, that we've got a very big challenge around access to market. What you do see around the country, if you're driving anywhere, is that you see all these agricultural products that are on the roadside that have been produced by whoever it is, the people in the rural areas, okay? And all you want to do is that everybody wants to buy them because they are underpriced. Is that because they are cheaper? The reason they are cheaper is because those people have no market to take them. They really want to get rid of them. Is that we had needed to develop. So we have seen 20 years that our rural producers have remained in poverty because they produce every year, but they still do not generate enough money to come out of the poverty. So this also had needed to be addressed in terms of having to create the right market to be able to consolidate that. If you produce that product which they have on the roadside, which is in Chongwe, here in Lusaka, you will never sell it for the price that you buy it for in Chongwe. So this needed to be addressed. And then of course there are policy issues that need to be addressed that actually support the SMEs, is that the tax base. So what you see is that SMEs who are actually registered and formal pay 4% turnover tax. Okay?
Every year, yeah.
No, every month.
Every month.
That 4% turnover tax is the highest tax there is in this country for any business. So the large organizations, in the effective rate at 4% is actually 44% every year. The commercial bank who makes, or the mines who makes the most money, their tax now has been reduced from 35 to 30%, which tax they only pay at the end of the year. The SME has to pay the tax on a monthly basis. So in essence, you are also taking away any money they might have had to be able to invest back into the business. For them to grow. So there are a number of inherent challenges that we need to do. And then, of course, there is no access to capital. When they do have access to capital, they also pay the highest interest rates. 38% is what an SME will pay interest if it borrowed from the bank. But they are not able to borrow from the bank, and they borrow from micro institutions for the short term. And that is 100%, 5% up to 10% on a monthly basis. So there are a number of issues that we need to sort out to be able to ensure that the SME can contribute, because they are working in a hostile business environment, and we need to create an environment that is conducive for SMEs to grow.
How do you think we can promote SMEs competitiveness in Zambia?
So the basic issue about improving competitiveness for SMEs is obviously that we need to be able to give them technical assistance, which is BDS, Business Development Services, that these SMEs need to grow from when they start. Everywhere else they do this in the world, where you give them technical assistance, whether you are giving them subsidized inputs, or you're giving them financial training, or you're giving them production training, and then what you're really doing is hand-holding them to go through the transition until they become to a point where they are competitive, and then you can move them into the next level. Okay,
there you have it. This is we are discussing today access to financing for SMEs, and in the studio we are joined by Mr. Trevor Ambai, who's an economist and financial advisor, and a number of issues have so far been discussed with regards to this topic. This is Business for Breakfast. We are going to take a short break, and we will be back where we will continue to discuss the topic for today.
Camnet TV is becoming big and better. You can now watch Camnet TV wherever you are around the world, simply by downloading the Camnet TV app. With Camnet TV app, you only use less bundles. Camnet TV, not just another channel.
Financing for small and medium enterprise, or access to financing rather, is our topic of discussion today. And in studio, of course, we have Mr. Trevor Ambai, who's just helping us dig deeper into this topic of access to financing for SMEs. And before we went for a break, Mr. Ambai did mention to say one of the reasons why most of these businesses do fail is the fact that they are taxed a lot. You will realize that for small and medium enterprise, they have to pay 50% tax almost every month, while big businesses have been given tax holidays, including the mining sector. We did see that in the 2022 national budget, where tax for mining sectors that are making billions and millions of kwachas have been given some tax incentives. And of course, big businesses like the banks and everyone. But you find that for small and medium enterprise, they are taxed at 4% every month, which Mr. Ambai did mention to say it is almost choking the profit that they have to make, because instead of reinvesting it in the business, they have to pay for tax. And of course, if you are a business personnel, we would like to hear from you. How is it that this high tax rate for small businesses has affected your business? And going forward, what is it that we need to look at? So, Mr. Ambai, maybe just to continue with our topic of discussion today, we have seen that soon, and I think probably this month or next month, we are, as a country, concluding the Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. Yes, that of course has been a topic of discussion. So do you think our small businesses, small and medium businesses in Zambia will be able to cope up with this Continental Free Trade Area?
This is an interesting one. So it's the same issue that I did raise, is that as a country we have been working towards having to do export diversification, which is that we need to be able to increase our non-traditional exports to move away from the copper. And we have not been able to do this since 1971. We had a 90% proportion of exports that was being generated by the mining sector. Right now, where we are around 78%. So we've had a 12% movement over 50 years. And this is because we have also not worked towards having to, to support the SME to be able to contribute towards the economic growth. The same thing aspect applies. If you want to do exports, is that you need to have a quantum of goods to be able to export. That quantum of goods is produced by small entities put together, which we haven't done. So the agriculture sector, which is the same thing. So if you want to export soybeans, is that you want to have 1,000 small-scale farmers all producing soybeans, and then you have supported them to produce the same quality of goods of the soybeans and standardize the packaging, put it together, consolidate it, and then you can export. Right now, we expect that you as an SME who is producing 200 bags of soybeans is going to export. But for an export contract, is that they require you to have a consistent supply on a monthly basis for 12 months. This cannot happen unless we can get 200 of you to be able to work together, produce the product in the same quality, and then export it. So we can't continue to talk about the Africa Free Trade Zone facility, which we are not going to maximize because we haven't done the homework internally to be able to export. We can't export until we sort out the internal issues in terms of producing the quality that is required. And it applies to all our goods. So the only people that are actually going to export are the large multinationals who are producing specific quantities which can go into the international market, while we as Zambians are having either to only export the product that I go and buy from the large multinationals, which is I have to go and buy like sugar or washing powder from a manufacturer, and then I can export this. But as an SME, it will be very difficult to actually export any of the products that we do have until we sort out the production side.
So would you really say the Continental Free Trade Area will collapse some of our small and medium enterprise businesses in Zambia?
It shouldn't collapse any of the businesses. It should offer them an opportunity for them to be able to get into the export market. The general issue is that, remember, the Africa Free Trade Zone agreement is that we as a country, Zambia, are competing on the international market against all the other countries. And for us to be able to compete is that we must work as a team within the country to go on the international market. What we try and do is that we want an individual to go on the international market to compete for the country, which doesn't usually work. And this is more important, that the enterprises must work together, but government must put in the right policies that are going to support this. Remember, in terms of having to support the export sector, the only facility that has been there that is speaking to this is the 15% tax incentive. So if your income tax was at 30%, if you are exporting, the revenue you generate from there, you're only paying 15%. And this has been there for the last 15, 20 years. It still has not driven enough exports out of the country. The second aspect is that for you to be able to export, we as a country is the only African country that I know that does not have any export finance. So if you got an export order, is that I must go to the bank and say I've got an export order, can I get export finance to be able to do this export? We do not have that facility. The ones that will be willing to do this is that it will take you more than 3 months for the bank to agree to actually give you the funding by the time you're ready, and your export contract is gone. So there are a number of issues that we need to sort out, which is the product, quality, the consolidation of the goods, and the export finance, but also the platforms under which we can export this. Is that we have continued to want to export to the DRC because the regulations there are a bit are not very stringent, but there is opportunity to be able to export to countries like China, to countries in the European zone as well, because that is where the greatest potential in terms of value is, and we must work towards having to get our product to meet that criteria.
Interesting. You did mention to say most of the time you realize that when you are traveling, you will notice that there are a lot of agriculture produce that are lined always up on the street, and the price that you buy them on those roads and compared to if you bring here in Zambia is different. So in terms of the agriculture sector, we know that the agriculture sector is Zambia's largest employer. And of course, it has the potential to an extent where we can even export most of the produce that we do make with regards to the agriculture sector. So can you really say we are utilizing the agriculture sector the way we are supposed to as a country?
We have abused the agriculture sector. Firstly is that the agriculture sector employs the largest proportion of the Zambian people because that is where they live. All the rural people, all the people that live in the rural areas are dependent on agriculture in terms of income. And for all that they are producing as a country, we have continued to be able to want to use this product at a depressed price. I feel very sad when I see those products on the roadside. Is that yes, the positive aspect is that our Zambian people are actually producing. But the sad thing is that the reason those things are on the roadside is that we have failed to be able to create a market structure that supports them. Those products should not be on the roadside. They should have been an established market facility where everybody can access them at a commercial price, which is going to allow our small-scale farmers to move out of poverty because they're being paid the right price. this still happens even with basic maize that we do have, that our maize that we are producing is being bought from the farmers at a non-commercial price, and they really can't generate profits. So if they were actually doing the numbers, you find that they're not making any money because the price that they're being paid is not commercial. So in essence, we have got work to do in terms of agriculture. Yes, we've got potential, all this arable land, all these water bodies that we have to be able to produce agricultural product, but if we can't get commercial price for this product, we are not being fair to the producers.
Now, this brings me to my next question. What do you think are some of the measures that can be applied to help minimize the failure rate of SMEs in the country?
So there are a number of areas that you can look at, but the first one that helps to support this SME sector is obviously having to do the BDS that I mentioned, that they must be given training. There are inherent challenges that we do have around our SMEs, which is their capacity for financial management. Secondly is also their access to market, is that they need to be supported in those areas. The third aspect is speaking obviously to access to finance. They've got funds to be able to support to do this, but also is that the access to finance must allow them that we are walking away from this debt position, which is where they are providing finance to large organizations or not being paid on time. When that does happen, is the SME that is going to default in repaying a loan, is that they'll only point at the SME that the SMEs don't pay back the loans. They will not mention the fact that because government has not paid the $2 billion that they owe to them. So these needed to be sorted out. Now, one of the ways that you can try and mitigate this in terms of the debt situation is that they must be working capital. So if I am an SME and I've provided goods and services to a large organization, I haven't been paid, I should be able to go and discount my invoice so that the bank can give me money to be able to cover this period when I haven't been paid. Those facilities needed to come into play to ensure that they can get some hedge in terms of having to mitigate the risk between the time they have supplied goods and the time that they do get paid. But there are a lot of issues, so we have got policy issues to be able to sort out. We've got access to finance to sort out, access to market, as well as having to support them in their productivity.
Okay, interesting.
That is interesting. Mr. Trevor Hambai is an economist and, of course, financial analyst, and we have been discussing access to financing for SMEs. Why is it that SMEs in Zambia are failing? And, of course, Mr. Hambai has mentioned a lot of financing activities which can help you, our viewer out there, as an SME, access your finances for the business in order to grow your business. So from me, of course, and Mr. Hambai, we are so excited and grateful that you had to come on the show and you have offloaded some of those important points with regards to access to financing for the SMEs. Maybe just in closing, what are your advice to the SMEs out there? You know, we've got a lot of SMEs, of course, that I mentioned that do come tomorrow, they stop the business, today you start, tomorrow you stop your business. Maybe just in concluding, what are your words what are your advice words to the SMEs out there?
The SME journey is a painful one, and especially if you're running it in this country. But I think you must be positive. Remember also that I keep saying about business for SMEs is that your potential to run a business is based on the inequalities that are in the market. That is where your profit is going to be generated. So I think you must be positive, you must drive your agenda, irrespective of what challenges you're going to face. That is what is going to separate you between the entrepreneur and the one who is aspiring to be an entrepreneur. But we must also obviously continue to advocate for government to create a conducive business environment so that as a country we are able to compete on the international market as SMEs. But we must remember that in terms of having going forward, while we're doing an economic recovery for the country, it is important that we find ways to support the SMEs, because that is the only way we are actually going to bring benefits to the Zambian people.
Okay, there you have it, Mr. Trevor Hambai. Thank you so much for joining us on the business for breakfast on Camnet TV. We hope to host you even next time as we passionately speak about the importance of SMEs and how they can contribute to the development of the Zambian economy. So we are going to take a short break, and of course we are going to continue with the discussion of today. We have another guest who will be joining us in studio, so stay tuned and let's get to interact. Thank you so much.
Oh, we testify, we celebrate. Hello, I'm Deborah Lukalu, all the way from South Africa. You are watching Camnet channel, not just another channel. God bless you. Stay tuned. We testify, we celebrate. For all you've done, Lord, we give you all the praise. Oh, we testify, we celebrate. For all you've done, Lord, we give you all the praise.
All parents and guardians of the Camnet Stars, be informed that there will be a meeting at the Healing Word Ministries International Church in Ibex Hill on 22nd January 2022. Time 10 hours to 11:30 hours. The future of this nation is in the hands of your children.
And we are just preparing for the game next week, the friendly match. We are working really hard and preparing for our first match.
Camnet Stars, the upcoming soccer giants in Zambia. TV is becoming big and better. You can now watch Camnet TV wherever you are around the world, simply by downloading the Camnet TV app. With Camnet TV app, you only use less bundles. Camnet TV, not just another channel.
Thank you so much for staying tuned to Camnet TV Breakfast Show. As usual, Fridays we always look at the business sector. And in studio this morning, we are joined by Mr. Fresha Swale, the new party Labour leader.
New Labour Party.
New Labour Party. Okay, who is just going to help us just discuss about getting Zambia out of its economic and debt crisis. Before we go into our main discussion, good morning to you.
Good morning, Miriam. Good morning,
Prudence.
And good morning to my fellow citizens.
So, getting into our topic of discussion this morning, how do you think some of the ways or means that government can use to help get Zambia out of this debt crisis that we are facing?
You see, first and foremost, that we must, before you can resolve any problem, you've got to understand the problem. For you to understand the problem, you must go back, in history. You must inquire into the foundations so that you know how deep the foundations are, how wide and how strong. Our biggest crisis in this country has been that we want to procure a roof before we build the house. Okay? And subsequent administrations from 1964 have tended, to repeat the same mistake all over and over. And hence, we can't get out of this problem, the debt crisis. First and foremost, if you want to build a house, because a nation is just a house. So if you want to build this house, what do you look for first? You've got to have a plan, then you cost the plan. What do you call a bill of quantities? You go to the professionals and get it. So you cost your development agenda. Okay? Now when you know the cost, then you can segment, that cost, short term, mid term, and long term. Now, at a personal level, we do that. But at the national level in Zambia, we don't do that. We don't cost, our national development agenda. Hence, our decisions are based on emotion, politics. Our development agenda are driven by politics. So, if you're going to do a road, you do a road so that people see a road. Okay? We've built a road for you. Vote for us. Now we must move away from that, from that practice, and begin to look at our development agenda in the short term, mid term, and long term. Now at government level, when you talk about short term planning is 5 years. Mid term plan is 25 years, which is a generation. The long term plan, you do 10 generations, which is 250 years. So then you put in place planning linkages. Okay? Now, if we're able to do that, then we'll be able to address the debt crisis. Okay? What you're calling a debt crisis. I don't see, what you call a debt crisis in Zambia as a crisis. It's leadership crisis that we have. What we owe is minimal. Is minimal as compared to the amount of resources that are in this country. Okay? But except that understanding, that knowledge and understanding is not there, is lacking.
Mr. Swale, that is interesting. Maybe even before we get to maybe talk about some of ways and means of having our economy to recover, what motivated you to join politics? In case you're just joining us, our viewer, we have Mr. Swale, who's the new Labour Party president. We now have a new party called the New Labour Party president. And we are with Mr. Swale, who's the president for the New Labour Party. So what motivated you to join politics or to form this New Labour Party?
You see, first and foremost, I've been in politics from 1978. There's something that happened to me. I was still in school. That's the time I started my politics. At that time, my parents had, given me pocket money. Okay? So that, because they were not going to be home, that when I returned from school, I should be able to buy something for myself to eat before they returned, so that I could have, a full meal. Now, upon, coming back from school, I went to the nearest shop, I found it closed. Then I walked to what was to be the the biggest market, because of many shops. I found the market closed. and all the shops were closed. And why were they closed? Because Kenneth Kaunda was in town. The president was in town. So the whole district of Luanshya should not eat because one man was in town. And I had to stay hungry because of one man. That is what drove me into politics. Okay. Because that was an injustice to me and to my fellow residents of Luanshya. And it's from that point I said,
I'm going to be a politician.
No, I'm going to fight for justice.
Okay. Okay.
Okay? And I've worked under so many political leaders. You know, I worked under late Dean Mungomba, Zadeko. I worked under Nevas Mumba. Actually, to a large extent, I drilled Nevas Mumba into politics. He was coming from the church, from a biblical background. So I had to anchor him into politics. Then I worked under, late President Michael Sata. I was co-secretary general of the Patriotic Front. And later I worked under the current president. I was his, special advisor in his office.
Interesting.
So it's from that point that when I left the current president, my colleagues, my idea was that I retire from politics. But my colleagues simply said, no, you can't. Okay? So they formed the New Labour Party and invited me to lead it. That is how I find myself as president of the New Labour Party.
Interesting. New Labour Party President, Mr. Fresha Siwale, and we are discussing, of course, economic recovery to the debt situation that Zambia has. So, Mr. Siwale, I throw this question to you. If you become the president of Zambia today, what would be the first thing that you would do in order to table the debt situation?
The first thing that I would do is that I would put in place measures to restore the mechanism for continuous recapitalizing of the economy. Now, this mechanism collapsed in 1971, and it manifested as a mortgage crisis in 1972. Now, because of this mortgage crisis, the entire capital base of the Zambian economy has been wiped out. And that's why you can't see our aviation industry take off. You've seen many companies, Aero Zambia, name them. They've come and gone. The aviation industry is capital intensive. Secondly, if you've noticed, we do not have capacity to finance major turnkey projects. Like, for example, a simple project like Heroes Stadium. Okay? We had to go and borrow $90 million from China. Zambia borrowing $90 million to build a cheap stadium like. It's because the consortium of Zambian banks cannot put together, finance in order to do a turnkey project like Hero Stadium. So the first thing that I'll do is restore the mechanism for continuous recapitalizing of the Zambian economy so that we build the capital base for the economy. Secondly, I would go back to 1964, okay, and review the first budget of the Republic of Zambia. When the British were leaving in 1964, on midnight, 23rd October 1964, when they delivered the Constitution of Independent Zambia, in that Constitution, they also delivered the first budget of the Republic of Zambia. Now, when you look at that budget, no single Zambian was in London, when that budget was being formulated. Okay? So what statistics did the British use to arrive at that budget? And you see, the other thing is that you must understand that that budget came as a grant. It had no relationship whatsoever with the Zambian economy. The British simply said they're going to spend so much in education, so much, in policing, so much in agriculture. Okay? They gave us figures, which had no relationship to our GDP. Okay? 57 years down the line, we're using the same template. We're using the same template. And that's the reason why, when you look at Musokotwane's budget, what you're calling the 2022 budget, may I call it a budget for a village economy? Because Musokotwane's budget is not related to the Zambian economy. Hear this. A budget is a percentage of GDP. You must always remember. A budget is a percentage of GDP. And the GDP is a product of the resource base. And it's 10 times the resource base. Okay? A resource base has 3 components: export receipts, local expenditure in the economy, and projected investment for that year. Now, when you look at Musokotwane's budget, are you able to trace the resource base? Has he clearly demonstrated the resource base?
We did see they did mention that they are going to borrow, and then some money
it's not a question
to come from businesses.
Because he's looking at the budget from a village point of view. Okay?
Are you saying the new Dawn government is looking at the budget from a
village point? Because listen to me, modern economics, you rely on a resource base, to formulate your budget. Now, in this country, people dream of figures. They dream of figures. Musokotwane just woke up and dreamt of those figures. There is no relationship between Musokotwane's budget and the Zambian economy. Let me demonstrate it to you. For example, when you go to Bank of Zambia will give you statistics that export receipts in this country, annual export receipts for Zambia, are in excess of $10 billion. Okay? So, what is our export GDP? It's 10 times. So, our export GDP, which is 1/3 of the resource base, should be in excess of $100 billion. You are taxing GDP in this economy on average of 30%. So, what is 30% of 100 billion? Should be around over $30 billion US dollars. Why is Musokotwane's budget at 10 billion? What has happened?
To the 20 billion.
To the 20 billion. Where has it gone to? Is Musokotwane relying on statistics from Bank of Zambia, or is ignoring, neglecting, and failing to use the statistics of government institutions?
Okay.
Secondly, local expenditure in the economy. You remember during the IMF Structure Adjustment Program implementation program, there was a component of microeconomics. Nowadays, we don't even talk about microeconomics. Okay? Because microeconomics is supposed to address your income and expenditure patterns, my income and expenditure pattern. Okay? Now, if my income and expenditure patterns are not captured, they will not get into the national budget. Why? Is because councils, local authorities are moribund. That information is supposed to be gotten from local authorities. There are many people who are not in formal employment, but they are doing business. They have an income, but it can't be captured onto the national budget. Thirdly, the projected investment. When you're building a house, okay, the law provides for you to take a plan to a local authority.
Yes, exactly.
Now that plan is projected investment. That is what is projected investment. Now councils around the country are moribund, and Musokotwane is not being able to access that, to bring it onto the national budget as a resource base. So that's why I say his budget is for a village economy, because it does not meet the minimum criteria for a modern economy.
Okay, interesting. You did mention to say the export base. If you look at the receipt at the Bank of Zambia, you realize that they are 10 billion. And if you multiply the way you did the multiplication of that, it was supposed to give us something like
$100 billion.
Yes.
Over $100 billion.
Over $100 billion. Apparently, the 10 billion that you gave, is it what it is at the Bank of Zambia, or it was just an assumption that you were making?
It's not an assumption. Go to Bank of Zambia, you're a media house. Go and ask them, what is, our annual export receipts, for example? in 2021, how much did Zambia export? If you want to address these issues, go and prod, go and ask Bank of Zambia, how much were export receipts in 2021? They'll give you. Over the last 10 years, we have an average of over $10 billion in export receipts. But why is this information failing to get onto our budget? Okay? It's because our leaders, also good economic leaders, do not understand the budgeting process. They're still using the template of 1964. Now, what is required is to embark on budget reforms. Budget reforms. Even the IMF, at one point, listen, at the end of the HIPC completion point, IMF, you know what HIPC is? Highly indebted poor country. When Zambia was declared a highly indebted poor country, the Zambian leadership even popped champagne to be declared a highly indebted poor person. You pop champagne, you celebrate, okay? So IMF just looked at us and says, this is a country of idiots, okay? So they wrote a letter of advice. You're talking about 16 years ago. They wrote a letter of advice to the government of Zambia to embark on budget reforms. You have enough resources in your economy, reform your budget, okay? Today, we're still going back to IMF. We want to go and borrow $1.3, $1.4 billion. We are a sick nation. We are a joke. Okay? And these institutions, they really look at us and wonder, what sort of people are they? They're doctors, professors. But look at their, the way they mess up. So we really need to begin to, to look into these issues so that we can embark on.
What do you think are some of the solutions that as government or as a nation we can take up so that we're able to resolve this issue of the economic and debt situation that we're facing as a country?
Like I said in the beginning, let us first understand where we're coming from, for us to know where we are. Then we can determine what trajectory to take. Are you with me? Our current problem is that we don't want to review our yesterday. We don't have time. Okay? And that has created a major problem. Like we're talking about, when I found, walked into the studio, I found Mr. Ambai talking about this SMEs. The SMEs are the engine room, for development. But if the SMEs cannot access capital, you're done. Two, if SMEs, the little that they have to provide capital to, to big organizations. And government itself, for example, food suppliers. Some have gone 10 years without being paid. So what is the net effect on their capital? They've all collapsed. They're all thrown into poverty by government. Okay? Now, what should be the role of government in an economy? The role of government is to induce population activity. Government should induce consumer spending. Now, from 1971, when the economy collapsed, okay, it's because government withdrew from its role, to induce population activity, to induce consumer spending. And this administration, from the current pronouncements, they've gone back to 1971, to the same policies that collapses the Zambian economy. So not until we begin to understand, you see, the genesis of this problem, we will not be able to address the current crisis that we have.
Mr. Fresha Siwale is the president for the New Labour Party, and we are discussing economic recovery. And of course, we know the big elephant that Zambia currently faces, which is the debt situation, and we are trying to table those issues. So, Mr. Siwale, you've explained the issue that has to do with the budget, where you say the budget that we are used is the one that the British or British people left us with.
Yes,
the template. And you are saying there is need to revise, reform rather the way the budget is done. If you were to become president today, what means would you use to make money to ensure that the Zambian economy has resources?
Like I told you, first and foremost, short to mid-term, resolve the mortgage crisis of 1972 by restoring the mechanism for continuous recapitalizing of the economy. Medium to long term, budget reform, so that we release the resources into the economy.
Those same resources, how do you plan to raise the resources? Because we've talked about the issue of IMF borrowing. We can't be going to the IMF to borrow and stuff like that. So if you are president today, how are you going to raise resources to finance the budget?
Let me give you an example. You see, in economic studies, you always say the size of your population is the size of your market. The size of your market is the size of your economy. So in essence, the population is the economy itself. Okay? Now, when you have 90% of your citizens, 90% of the population outside economic activity, government will never have resources. Okay? Let's look at our friends in Europe and America. Why do they pay babies? You know that when you're in UK, the government pays £500 per week, you know, to a baby. In America, it's $500 to a baby. Why does government pay these babies? Okay? There are two sides to this. First and foremost, government is preparing for the next generation of citizens. Okay? This generation of citizens must have a developed brain, a stimulated brain, and this citizen must grow up with an ego. Okay? So it means that this baby must be fed, you know, for brain development to take place. Must be well dressed, you know. If for example, you know, after this interview, I take you into a boutique and I buy new clothing and shoes. Are you going to walk the same way, or the walk will change? Even babies feel that ego, okay? Because we are the same. Now, when government begins to finance the creation of the next generation of citizens, what will happen? Let's take an example. You know, if say, for example, we had 1 million babies in Zambia, and government is paying 500 kwacha, just 500 kwacha. You know what would happen? It means that government will be spending 500 million kwacha every week, or 26 billion kwacha in 52 weeks, which is a year. Now, what that means is that government has already induced, you know, demand in the market. So, you know that when a baby is born, they use about 6 to 7 diapers in a day. So it means that in the market, there's need for 7 million diapers to be produced, to be manufactured. Do you know what industry that is? Okay? You need cotton to produce that 7 million. What will it do to agriculture? Then you need the polythene. You know, there's that polythene for, you know, for to put outside the. You have the seed, you know, cotton seed, you know, manufacturers. You have the chemicals. So the agriculture sector already, there's, you know, induced a demand. Okay. Now what that means is that out of this activity, the GDP, the gross domestic product, will be 10 times. So it will be around 260 billion kwacha. And when you look at taxation, around 30%. It means that you collect about government will collect around 78 billion. So if they take out...
Maybe just your concluding remarks in just 1 minute.
No, just So if you're going to take out 26 billion, which they spent, which was not there, government would make a profit of 52 billion. Now, every government, a sane government, must make profit from population activity. That's the reason why you must be able first to induce, the market before you can collect taxes. Now, in this country, we are like, people who want to milk a cow before feeding it and before giving it water. And this is where the crisis, in the end, you're going to milk blood from a cow. Over the years, from 1971, government moved away from its responsibility, towards its citizens, and hence all these problems that you have. You cannot make money if you don't spend money. Government business is serious business, okay? And the sooner government begins to spend money in the economy, then they will have no revenue to collect. They'll go borrowing all over.
Mr. Fresha Suwale is the new Labour Party president, and we were discussing economic recovery. For everyone that joined us today, thank you so much for tuning in to Camnet TV, not just another channel. This was the Friday edition of Business for Breakfast, and of course, I was joined by my co-host, Miriam Kaimba. Miriam.
Yes, Prudence. So this is always the sad parts that we have to say our goodbyes, but hope to join us next time, the same time at that's 7 hours to 9 hours every Friday as well. We'll get to talk about business. And in the studio, we're joined by Mr. Fresha Suwale, who was just helping us to talk about the economic recovery of the country, that is Zambia. So for me and my co-host and the rest of our production team, it's bye-bye.